Most people start the year with excitement, with resolutions, with vision boards, with promises. They're going to work out, lose weight, start a business, read more, be better, different, transformed. And by February, maybe March, if they're disciplined, they're right back where they started. Same patterns, same problems, same version of themselves. Just a little more disappointed, a little more cynical, a little more convinced that change isn't really possible. But here's what they miss. They're starting wrong. They're building on a foundation that's already cracked. They're trying to add new habits to old patterns, trying to become someone new without letting go of who they've been trying to transform, without doing the hard work of honest assessment. Brutal pruning, intentional design, and you can't build strength on a weak foundation. You can't create lasting change without first creating the conditions that make change possible. The Stoics didn't believe in hoping for the best. They believed in preparing for reality, in examining yourself honestly, in removing what doesn't serve, in building systems that survive your worst days, not just your best ones. Marcus Aurelius didn't start each year with dreams. He started with brutal self-assessment, with clear standards, with non-negotiable commitments. And that's what we're going to do today. Not 5 wishes, 5 actions, not 5 hopes, 5 requirements, not 5 things that might be nice, but 5 things you must do if you're serious about beginning this year stronger, not just feeling stronger for a few weeks, but actually building a foundation that makes you unshakable, because strength isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built in the unglamorous work of honest preparation. And if you do this work now, if you invest in these 5 things before you chase any goal, before you make any promise, you'll build a year that doesn't collapse when motivation fades, when life gets hard, when the initial excitement dies. Let's begin. 1. Conduct a brutal inventory. The first thing you need to do before you add anything new, before you commit to anything different, is take inventory, honest, brutal, unflinching inventory of where you actually are, not where you wish you were, not where you were supposed to be by now, where you actually are right now. And most people skip this step because it's uncomfortable, because they don't want to admit how far they've drifted, how many commitments they've broken, how much time they've wasted, how little they've changed, despite all the promises they made. But you can't navigate to a destination if you don't know your starting point, and you can't build a stronger version of yourself if you're lying about who you currently are. So here's what you do. You take out a piece of paper and you write down the truth about every major area of your life: your health, your relationships, your work, your finances, your character, your habits. And you don't soften it. You don't explain it away. You don't make excuses. You just observe and record what's your actual energy level. Not when you're trying, not on your best day, but your baseline. How do you actually feel most mornings, most afternoons? What's your actual physical condition? Can you run a mile, do 10 pull-ups, touch your toes? Or have you let yourself decay while telling yourself you'll start eventually? What's the actual state of your relationships? Who actually shows up for you? Who do you actually invest in? Which connections are real and which are just comfortable lies you're both maintaining? What's your actual work output? Not what you're capable of, but what you actually produce. How much time do you waste? How much do you procrastinate? How often do you do the minimum? What's your actual financial situation? Not your income, but your habits. Are you building or bleeding? Are you in control or just hoping? And most importantly, what's your actual character? Do you keep your word to yourself? Do you follow through on commitments? Do you have standards or just preferences that shift based on how you feel? Marcus Aurelius wrote every morning, begin each day by telling yourself, today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty. That's not pessimism, that's inventory. That's knowing what you're actually facing so you can prepare for it. And when you do this inventory, when you really look at where you are, you're going to see some uncomfortable things. You're going to realize you're not as far along as you told yourself you were. that you've been lying to yourself about your progress, about your discipline, about your growth, and that's good, because you can't fix what you won't acknowledge. You can't change what you're pretending isn't a problem. The inventory, the brutal, honest inventory, is the foundation of everything else. Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. But before you can say what you would be, you have to see what you currently are completely, clearly, without the stories, without the excuses, without the comfortable lies. So take the inventory, write it down, every area where you're falling short, every commitment you've broken, every standard you've let slide, every way. You're not who you said you'd be, and don't do this to shame yourself. Do it to see clearly, because once you know exactly where you are, you can start building from reality, not from fantasy. 2. Eliminate ruthlessly once you've taken inventory. Once you know where you actually are, the second thing you must do is eliminate, and not just trim, not just reduce. Eliminate ruthlessly. Here's what most people don't understand. You can't add meaningful new things to a life that's already cluttered with meaningless old things. You can't build new habits when your time is consumed by old ones. You can't become someone new while you're still maintaining relationships, commitments, patterns that only serve the old version of you. So you have to prune, you have to cut, and not just the obviously bad stuff, but the mediocre, the comfortable, the things that aren't terrible but aren't helping you become who you're trying to be. Look at your relationships. Not all of them are worth keeping. Not everyone who was important to you in the past deserves space in your future. Some people you've outgrown, some people are energy drains, some people keep you small, not because they're evil, but because they need you to stay the version of you they're comfortable with. Eliminate or create distance, not with drama, not with explanation, just with quiet, consistent unavailability. You don't owe anyone access to your transformation. Look at your habits, the things you do automatically. How much time do you spend scrolling? How many hours disappear into content that doesn't build you? How much of your day is consumed by things you don't even enjoy? You just do them because you're bored. Eliminate, create friction between you and your worst habits. Delete the apps, block the sites. Remove the easy access. Make the destructive things harder and the constructive things easier. Look at your commitments, the things you said yes to months or years ago that you're still carrying out of obligation or guilt. The committees, the groups, the standing appointments that drain you, that take time without giving back. Eliminate. You're allowed to quit. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to say, this made sense before, but it doesn't serve where I'm going now. Look at your physical environment, the clutter, the junk, the things you keep meaning to deal with that just sit there, creating background chaos in your space, which creates chaos in your mind. Eliminate, throw it out, donate it, sell it, clear the space, because physical clutter is mental clutter, and you can't think clearly in a cluttered environment. And look at your internal commitments, the shoulds, the supposed tos, the stories about who you have to be based on what others expect. Eliminate. You don't have to be the person you've always been. You don't have to maintain an identity that no longer serves you. You're allowed to let go of versions of yourself that you've outgrown. Seneca wrote, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And most of what we waste on things we never consciously chose. We just inherited or accumulated or said yes to once and never reconsidered." This is your reconsideration. This is where you look at everything, every person, every habit, every commitment, everything you own, every identity you carry, and you ask one question: does this serve who I'm becoming? Not who I was, not who I'm comfortable being, but who I'm becoming. And if the answer is no, if it's even "I'm not sure," you eliminate. Because here's the truth. Addition by subtraction is real. When you remove what's weighing you down, you don't just have less. You have more energy, more clarity, more space for what actually matters. And this has to be ruthless, because your old life, your old patterns, they won't give up easily. They'll whisper that you're being too harsh, too extreme, that you'll regret this, but you won't. What you'll regret is arriving at the end of another year, still carrying dead weight, still maintaining commitments that serve no one, still trapped in a cluttered life because you were too scared to eliminate, prune hard, prune deep, create space. And in that space, you'll build something new. 3. Set non-negotiable standards. Now that you've taken inventory, now that you've eliminated, the third thing you must do is set standards. Real standards, non-negotiable standards, not goals, not wishes, not things you'll try for, but lines you will not cross, floors you will not fall below, minimums you will maintain no matter what. And this is where most people fail, because they set aspirational goals. I want to work out 5 times a week. I want to read 50 books this year. I want to build a business, but they don't set standards. They don't establish the non-negotiable baseline that they'll maintain even on their worst days. Goals are what you aim for. Standards are what you won't fall below. And if you don't have standards, if you don't have a floor, you'll collapse all the way down every time. Motivation fades every time life gets hard. So here's what you do. You identify the key areas: health, relationships, work, character, and for each one you set a minimum standard. Not an aspirational goal, but a baseline that you will maintain no matter how you feel, no matter what else is happening for health. Maybe your standard is you train 3 times minimum every week. Not 5, not 7, 3, because 3 you can maintain when work is crazy, when you're tired, when life is chaos. 3 is the floor, and you can exceed it often, but you never fall below it. Maybe your standard is you're in bed by 11 p.m. on work nights, not because you always sleep great, but because that's the minimum you need to function, and that's non-negotiable, not flexible, not dependent on how you feel. For relationships, maybe your standard is you reach out to someone you care about at least once a week, not scrolling their posts, but actual connection, actual investment, because that's the minimum required to maintain real relationships. Maybe your standard is you don't accept disrespect from anyone, not once, not as a favor, not to keep the peace. Disrespect of your time, your boundaries, your word, that's below your standard, and you enforce that consistently for work. Maybe your standard is 2 hours of deep focused work every single day before you check anything, before you respond to anything. 2 hours of building, creating, moving forward. That's the minimum non-negotiable. Maybe your standard is you do what you say you're going to do. When you say, yo, you're going to do it. Not when it's convenient. Not when you feel like it. Your word is your standard and you keep it for character. Maybe your standard is you don't lie, not to others, not to yourself, not little lies, not harmless lies. Truth is your standard even when it's uncomfortable. Maybe your standard is you face things directly. No avoidance, no procrastination. When something needs to be handled, you handle it that day because that's who you are now. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And being one starts with standards, with establishing what you will and will not accept from yourself. And here's what's critical. These standards have to be non-negotiable, not most of the time, not when it's easy, always. Because the moment you start negotiating with your standards, the moment you make exceptions, they stop being standards and become suggestions. You don't negotiate with gravity. You don't negotiate with the laws of physics. Your standards should be the same. They're not up for debate, not dependent on your mood. They're just how you operate now. And yes, this is uncomfortable. Yes, it means some days you'll train when you really don't want to. Some nights you'll go to bed when you'd rather stay up. Some moments you'll tell the truth when a lie would be easier. But that discomfort is the price of integrity, of self-trust, of becoming someone whose word means something, especially to yourself. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And you can't be master of yourself if you're constantly negotiating with your own standards. If your baseline keeps shifting based on how you feel, set the standards, write them down, make them specific, make them clear, and then make them non-negotiable, because goals inspire you, But standards build you, and this year isn't about inspiration, it's about construction. So, 4. Design systems, not just goals. The fourth thing you must do, and this is where most people completely miss the mark, is design systems, not just goals. Everyone sets goals. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to make 6 figures. I want to read more. And goals are fine. They give you direction, but they don't give you daily action. They don't tell you what to do. Today, tomorrow, the day after. Systems are the daily practices, the repeated behaviors, the automatic processes that make goals inevitable, not hopeful. And if you want to begin the year stronger, you need to stop thinking about what you want to achieve and start thinking about what you need to do consistently to make that achievement automatic. Here's the difference goal: lose 20 pounds. System: train 4 days a week. Eat protein at every meal. No snacking after 8 p.m. That's a system, and if you run that system, the goal takes care of itself. Goal: read 50 books. System: read 30 minutes every morning before you check your phone. Carry a book everywhere. Read instead of scroll. That's a system, and if you run it, you'll blow past 50 books. Goal: build a business system. 2 hours of deep work on the business every single morning before anything else. 1 piece of content created daily, 1 sales conversation weekly. That's a system. And if you run it, the business builds itself. You see the difference. Goals are outcomes. Systems are processes, and you control processes. You don't control outcomes. You can control whether you train today. You can't control whether you lose weight today. You can control whether you work on the business. You can't control whether it succeeds immediately. You can control your daily reading habit. You can't control how fast you finish books. So stop focusing on outcomes and start designing the systems that make outcomes inevitable. And here's what good systems have. They're specific, not vague. Work out more isn't a system. Train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday at 6 a.m. for 1 hour. That's a system. They're sustainable, not extreme. Work 16 hours a day isn't a system. That's a sprint, and sprints end. 2 hours of deep work daily. That's sustainable. You can run that for years. They're trackable, not subjective. Be more productive. You can't track that 2 deep work sessions completed. You can track that. And what gets tracked gets done. They're resistant to your worst days, because you will have worse days, tired days, unmotivated days, and your systems need to survive those. They need to be the floor, the minimum you maintain even when everything else falls apart. Carl Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And systems are what you do. Goals are what you say you'll do. So design your systems for the 5 key areas: health, relationships, work, character growth. What's the daily practice, the repeated behavior, the automatic process that, if you run it consistently, creates the outcome you want? And here's the key: your systems need to run before you feel like running them. They need to be scheduled, built into your day, protected time that happens regardless of motivation, because motivation is weather. It comes and goes. But your systems are infrastructure. They run in any weather. You don't check if you feel like brushing your teeth, you just do it. Your systems need to be the same, not dependent on feeling, just automatic. Execution. Aristotle taught, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. But habits are just systems, repeated behaviors that compound. And if you design the right systems, if you protect them, if you run them consistently, excellence becomes inevitable. Not because you're exceptional, but because your systems are so. Stop setting goals and start designing systems, because goals get you excited for a week. Systems get you results for a lifetime. Commit to your growth edge. And the 5th thing you must do, the thing that separates people who transform from people who just reorganize their stagnation, is commit to your growth edge, to deliberately, consistently putting yourself in positions that stretch you. Your growth edge is the place where you're capable, but uncomfortable, where you have to reach, where you're not sure you can do it, but you might be able to. That's where growth happens, not in your comfort zone, not in the impossible zone, but right there at the edge of your current capacity. And most people avoid this edge. They either stay comfortable doing what they've always done, or they jump to the impossible goals so far beyond their capacity that failure is guaranteed, and neither approach creates growth. Growth happens at the edge when you're stretching just beyond what you know you can do. And the fifth commitment you must make is to deliberately find that edge and spend time there regularly. For some of you, the growth edge is physical. You've let your body decay and just getting back in the gym. That's your edge. For others, it's not starting, it's intensity. You've been comfortable for years, going through the motions, and your edge is pushing harder, training in ways that scare you. For some, the growth edge is social. You've been hiding, isolated, avoiding connection, and your edge is reaching out, is being vulnerable, is risking rejection, is showing up in spaces where you're not comfortable. For others, it's not connection, it's confrontation. You've been a people pleaser, avoided conflict, kept the peace, and your edge is setting boundaries, is saying what needs to be said, is being willing to upset people in service of your truth. For some, the growth edge is creative. You've been consuming forever, never creating, and your edge is putting work into the world, is risking judgment, is making something that might not be good enough for others. It's not creating, it's shipping. You've been perfecting forever, never releasing, and your edge is letting go, is putting imperfect work out there, is finishing instead of polishing. For some, the growth edge is financial. You've been playing it safe, scared of risk, and your edge is investment, is building something, is betting on yourself. For others, it's not risk, it's discipline. You've been chasing opportunities, never building foundations, and your edge is consistency, is sticking with one thing, is delayed gratification. The specific edge doesn't matter. What matters is that you identify it. You find the place where you're currently avoiding discomfort, where you're staying safe, where you're not pushing, and you commit to going there regularly. Because here's what happens when you avoid your growth edge: you stagnate, you plateau, you stop developing. You become the same person, having the same year over and over, just with different dates. But when you commit to your edge, when you deliberately put yourself in positions that stretch you, you grow, you develop capacity. You become someone new, someone stronger, more capable, more resilient. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances. Action, what stands in the way, becomes the way." Your growth edge is what stands in the way. And if you go toward it instead of away from it, it becomes the way forward. So here's your commitment. Identify your growth edge, the place where you're avoiding discomfort, and commit to going there at least once a week. Minimum. Maybe that's a cold shower every morning. Maybe it's approaching someone you find intimidating. Maybe it's publishing something imperfect. Maybe it's having a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's training at an intensity that scares you. Maybe it's investing money in yourself. Maybe it's saying no when you want to say yes. Maybe it's being alone when you want distraction. Whatever it is, wherever your edge is, commit to it. Make it part of your system schedule. Protect it and do it, even when, especially when you don't want to, because growth doesn't happen when you feel ready. It happens when you move anyway, when you push into discomfort, when you prove to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." But you have to actually encounter difficulties, actually face resistance, actually push your edge, or there's nothing to strengthen against. And here's what's powerful: when you commit to your growth edge, when you regularly put yourself in uncomfortable positions, two things happen. First, you develop capacity. You get stronger, more resilient, more capable. You prove to yourself that you can handle things. And that proof becomes confidence, not fake confidence, but earned confidence. And second, your comfort zone expands. What's uncomfortable today becomes normal tomorrow. And you can push further, can reach higher, can become more. This is how you transform, not through hoping or wishing, but through systematic exposure to discomfort, through regular trips to your growth edge, through proving over and over that you're capable of more than the comfortable version of you ever attempted. So commit. Identify your edge, schedule your exposure, and push regularly, consistently, without exception, because this year isn't about being comfortable. It's about being stronger, and stronger is built at the edge. The integration. Now you have the 5 things: brutal inventory, ruthless elimination, non-negotiable standards, systematic design, commitment to your growth edge, and here's how they work together. The inventory shows you where you are, the elimination creates space, the standards establish your floor, the systems make progress automatic, and the growth edge ensures you're expanding without inventory. You're building on lies without elimination. You're building on clutter without standards. You'll collapse when it's hard, without systems. You're relying on motivation without your edge. You'll plateau, but with all 5. With these foundations in place, you're not hoping for a better year. You're architecting one. You're creating the conditions where transformation isn't optional. It's inevitable, because here's what the Stoics knew. Hope is not a strategy. Wishing is not a plan. You don't become stronger by accident. You become stronger by design, by doing the unglamorous work of honest assessment, brutal pruning, clear standards, systematic execution, and regular discomfort. Most people will skip this work. They'll jump straight to goals, to resolutions, to excitement, and by March, they'll be exactly where they are now, but you're not. Most people, you're someone who's willing to do what most people won't, to look honestly at where you are, to cut what needs cutting, to set real standards, to design real systems, to push into real discomfort, and that willingness, that commitment to the hard work that separates people who change from people who just talk about it. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid, and people will think you're extreme. They'll say you're too rigid, too intense, too focused. Let them think what they want. You're building something, they're just maintaining. You're growing, they're coasting, you're designing, they're drifting. And a year from now, when they're making the same resolutions, having the same problems, being the same person, you'll be somewhere completely different. Not because you got lucky, not because you're special, but because you did these 5 things. You laid the foundation and you built on it daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." These 5 things, they're about internal power, about what's in your control. You can't control outcomes, but you can control inventory. You can control elimination. You can control your standards. You can control your systems. You can control whether you push your edge, and when you control those things, when you do this work, strength isn't something you hope for, it's something you build. One honest assessment at a time, one elimination at a time, one maintained standard at a time, one system execution at a time, one trip to your edge at a time. This is how you begin the year stronger, not with excitement, but with architecture, not with wishes, but with work. So do it. Take the inventory, eliminate ruthlessly, set the standards, design the systems, commit to your edge. And 12 months from now, you won't need to wonder if you're stronger. You'll know because you built it, because you did the work, because you started right. Stay focused, stay grounded. The year doesn't build itself, you build it. Starting with these 5 things, starting now.